That was the scene in Oakland, California overnight after riot police stormed the Occupy Oakland protests, set off tear gas and fired rubber bullets at the protesters in an effort to clear the encampment. The Oakland protesters returned to the Oscar Grant Plaza about an hour ago. Everything is peaceful so far. Some people, including many Republican politicians, say they don't understand why the Occupy America protesters are upset, even though New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg told them why back on September 17th, when he, in effect, predicted all of this. We have a lot of kids graduating college, can't find jobs. That's what happened in Cairo. That's what happened in Madrid. You don't want those kinds of riots here. The very next day, September 17th, hundreds of protesters convened in Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan for day one of the Occupy Wall Street protests. At the top of Profiles in Greed last night, we told you the results of a Congressional Budget Office report on income distribution in the United States over the last 3 decades. The top 1% saw their income increase a staggering 275%, while everyone else, 99%, saw their incomes increase between 65 and 18%. The CBO report also found that the share of income received by the top 20% now exceeds the share of income received by the other 80% of Americans. Joining me now is Dorian Warren, an assistant professor of political science at Columbia University and a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Thanks for joining me tonight, Dorian.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence.
Dorian, how would you explain this remarkable graph over the last 30 years at the top of the income curve? What's happened in this country?
Well, it's shocking, first of all, that this is now becoming a mainstream issue. It has been talked about for decades and for years by folks, and it wasn't until the Occupy Wall Street protesters and now this CBO report was released yesterday that it's...
We've done these tests of people saying, describe your country, and we would give them different tests that would show exactly this kind of income inequality.
Yes.
And then something that was a more equal distribution, never equal, but more proportionate distribution. And virtually no one would pick the correct way the United States income curve was actually shaped. No one in the country really knew this before this.
That's right. And it's hard for Americans to believe that the United States is the most unequal of all advanced industrial democracies. We are more unequal than Western Europe, for instance. And most explanations for this are that it's the economy, it's the labor market, when in fact this is due to politics and policy. Our tax policy has changed over the last 30 years so that the top rate at 70% at one point is now all the way down to 28%. We have policies that we tried to update, like the minimum wage. For instance, in 1968, the minimum wage was worth $10 an hour. Today, it's $7.25. We have a broken labor law so that 1 in 3 workers, when they try to join a union, get fired from their jobs illegally. So these are all policies that have been put in place or have been prevented from being updated that account for a lot of this inequality.
We're showing you live pictures of the New York City Occupy Wall Street protests at this hour in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. Dorian, the report says that the financial sector and the rest of the economy appears inexplicably large from 1990 onward. Compared to the rest of the economy. The authors believe that deregulation and corporate finance activities linked to initial public offerings and credit risk are the primary causes for the higher compensation differential. They adjusted for all the variables, education differences and so forth with people working on Wall Street. And they said there's a very strange amount of money being made there that wasn't being made there before.
That's right. The top 1% take home about a quarter of the nation's income every year. But it's no accident that Occupy Wall Street is Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
Because the top 1% of New York City take home roughly 45% of the city's income. And that's driven by the financial sector. And that's unusual. That wasn't how it used to be in the immediate post-World War II years, where we had shared prosperity among all Americans, not just those at the very top becoming the winners.
Professor Dorian Warren of Columbia University, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence.